Thanks for staying with us this morning. We're at the Kansas Beef Council office here in Topeka, and we're joined by Kevin Thielen, the Executive Director of the Kansas Beef Council. So, Kevin, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
We're going to talk a little bit about TPP, which is Trans-Pacific Partnership, but let's just talk about overall beef demand when we talk about world supplies and ending stocks. Beef is kind of on a roll still.
Yeah, it is. And, I think most producers recognize that there's huge value there in those international markets for us. And, to be very honest, we've seen a little bit of a setback as far as the overall value that's coming back to our beef industry from exports. And most of what I've learned about that is it has to do with the value of the dollar. And if you think about somebody who's importing that into their country, basically with the currency up a little bit, their purchasing power is a little bit diminished. And so, TPP is one of those things that's going to help us, I think, moving forward here, and that's going to be hugely positive. Currently, about $266 of our fed animal value comes from exports, so it's a huge percent. But again, I think comparing year over year, we've seen about a 5% reduction in the overall value that it's bringing back to us. And total, it's about $4.3 billion for our U.S. beef industry, so still a huge dollar amount, but we just have seen it set back a little bit.
Well, when we talk about exports, we talk about herd expansion. I mean, you can't put those two together without talking about herd expansion. And I know what's going on here in the U.S. and Kansas as well.
Yeah, and actually, that is probably the positive for us because, even though, the prices that we're selling cattle for, really even when those prices come back a little bit and the supply increases, what that does is makes us more competitive. And one of our chief competitors that we compete with in the international trade is Australia. And they're to a point where they've really diminished a lot of their domestic supply of cattle. And so they're kind of where we were a couple of years ago with the drought. And so I think that's going to be super positive for us as well. Brian, we have 5 markets. Our top 5 export markets would be Japan, Mexico, Canada, South Korea, and Middle East. So, we have a lot of areas that really enjoy that quality grain-fed product that we are known for. And I think taste typically always drives what people demand for.
Perfect. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to kind of get an idea of the health of the beef industry here in the state of Kansas. You're watching kansasAGreport. We'll see you in just a minute.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Regenerative Medicine Center. Your stem cells, your health, your life. Farmers Insurance, your best protection against the unexpected. Call Agent Dan Key at 785-408-5459. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com. Blue River Traders, the finest selection of Western-style furniture for your home. BlueRiverTraders.com.
Thanks for staying with us. We're at the Kansas Beef Council office here in Topeka. We're joined by Kevin Thielen, the Executive Director. We've talked a little bit about TPP. And let's talk about checkoff dollars. I think everybody who's in the industry understands how checkoff dollars work here in the U.S. and here in the state, but it also works internationally as well.
It does. And Brian, I think we're lucky. We have the U.S. Meat Export Federation, which is our if you will, kind of the international marketing arm for the beef checkoff. And USMEF actually, they have funding from pork, from soybean, from corn, because corn and soybean at least, they realize that when they export meat, they're essentially exporting their product, and so it's been a focus for them. In Kansas, we've always invested into the U.S. Meat Export Federation because our board recognizes the importance of these international markets, and going back to that $260, it got close to $300 per animal. I mean, that's a huge market for us, and I think one of the things that people need to remember is a lot of times we're not exporting steaks or middle meats. We're exporting maybe tongues and livers and things like that, and by moving them to those international markets, we're increasing the value of them hugely. So it's just a huge benefit for us when we export.
Hides as well.
Yeah, hides extremely invaluable. And that's actually, in 2008 when we had a slowdown in the world economy, that was actually one of the areas where we really saw a pullback was in the value of those hides going to China and places like that.
This also ties in with TPP. I mean, we're talking about international partnership and international marketing for the beef.
Yeah, so USMEF has been working for several years, along with a lot of other people, partners, to work on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And basically, if you think about just Japan, our largest market, we're going to see a tariff reduction over a number of years from 38% down to 9%, on some products down to 0. If you kind of think about it in like maybe a beef jerky product that would be exported into Japan, the tariff right now is at 50%, and it's going to move down to 0. So I think a huge win for us, and especially when we start talking about the value of the dollar and how that's up, and that makes us a little less of an advantage. TPP and that reduction in that tariff is going to be huge. So, I think we're going to, over the coming years, we're really going to see some benefits. Well,
not only Japan, but this could open up major other markets. We're talking about 11 countries, basically in the Asia Pacific area.
Yeah, Vietnam is another huge one. We're going to see a reduction there